Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Folks, our democracy hangs on by a thread. It's barely surviving. Barely. And it just keeps getting worse. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't like to bring you bad news. But we got to look at where we are realistically so that we can look at what we can do to try to survive, to salvage what remains of our democracy. So this past weekend, I came across an article that is very alarming, very disturbing about the state of our democracy. And you're going to see that it's going to make where we are crystal clear. There'll be no debate, no doubt, once we read this article. All right, let's go to it. So, this is in the Guardian magazine. It's on their website. And as you see here, it says, U.S. federal judges consider creating own armed security force as threats mount. Now, just get a load of that. Federal judges in this country are now considering creating their own armed security because of mounting threats. So let's go to the article. I want to read it. I want you to get it straight from this article. And then I got a few things that I want to tell you that I believe can help us in this moment. So this says proposal would move security under judges' control as Justice Department has vowed loyalty to Trump. All right. It's a fairly short article, but we need to read it. Federal judges are discussing a proposal that would shift the armed security personnel responsible for their safety away from the Department of Justice, DOJ, and under their own control as fears mount that the Trump administration is failing to protect them from a rising tide of hostility. So they're considering putting their security under their control because they don't have any confidence in the Trump administration, most especially the Department of Justice, in protecting them as threats mount. Now, why are the threats mounting? Because they are the only line of defense right now from Trump completely turning our country over into an authoritarian country. They're the only ones who are preventing that from happening. They are the only ones who are preventing Trump from violating the Constitution and demanding that people get their due process rights. They are the front line in that fight. And as they continue to defy him, MAGA threatens them. Again, as they defy Trump, MAGA threatens them. And they don't have confidence that the Trump administration will protect them from those threats because the U.S. Marshal Service is under the control of the Department of Justice. And this Department of Justice is under the control of the White House. So they want to take matters into their own hands. All right, let's go back to the article. The Wall Street Journal revealed on Sunday that the idea of creating their own armed security detail emerged at a meeting of about 50 federal judges 2 months ago. A security committee at the twice-yearly Judicial Conference, a policy-making body for federal judges, raised concerns about the increasing number of threats against judges following Trump's relentless criticism of court rulings against his policies. And that is the other reason why the threats mount. Every time Trump attacks a judge or the federal judiciary, there are MAGA members out there who are ready to carry out those threats. So his rhetoric essentially puts these judges' life in danger because there are so many people out here who are deranged, who are off their rockers, and when Trump says something critical of someone else, they will go out and try to bring it to pass, basically. Under the current system, federal judges are protected by the U.S. Marshal Service, which is managed by the Justice Department. According to Wall Street Journal, those participating at the March conference expressed worries that Trump might instruct the marshals to withdraw security protection from a judge who ruled against him. That is a reasonable concern because we have seen him take away security from folks he deemed that crossed him, like John Bolton and others. So that's a legitimate concern on their part. Amid those anxieties, the ideal surface that federal judges should form their own armed security force. I mean, that is unprecedented to my knowledge. I've never heard of federal judges in this country being so afraid of the executive branch that they don't believe the executive branch would protect them. That is unprecedented. Never has that happened in American history, to my knowledge. So the article goes on to say, at present, marshals fall under the remit of Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General. Bondi was appointed by the president and is a Trump loyalist. She has made clear she will be guided by him, breaking a decades-long norm that kept the White House at arm's length from the DOJ to ensure law enforcement and prosecutorial independence. Well, we remember when Trump went to the Department of Justice and gave a speech and basically said he's entitled to get some payback and he's entitled to use the DOJ to get that payback. That was just a couple of months ago. All right, let's jump down to the judge was then targeted by a swatting attack where a fake alarm is called into police and a SWAT team sent out to the individual's home. This is the kind of stuff that MAGA is out there doing. And it goes on to say senior Democrats have demanded investigation into a spate of dozens of pizza deliveries to the homes of federal judges. The actions are seen as intimidatory as it shows judges that their private addresses are known. Federal judges have found themselves on the front lines of constitutional battles over Trump's executive orders, over such contentious issues as birthright citizenship, the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, and the dismissal of tens of thousands of federal employees. So far, there have been 249 legal challenges to Trump administration's actions, according to a Just Security tracker. So clearly we see here that these judges' lives are in danger. They're getting these swatting calls. They're getting pizzas being delivered to their homes just to communicate to them that MAGA knows where they live. And they don't trust the Trump administration to protect them. They have the fear that Trump will go as far as instructing the U.S. Marshal Services not to protect a particular judge. So they feel the need to take matters into their own hands. Unprecedented. And it shows you where our country is. Our democracy is barely hanging on as President Trump attacks judges, law firms, lawyers, universities, the media, and on and on. So there are 5 things I want you to remember as we face this unprecedented era that we're living in right now. First, our democracy is fragile. I got to admit that I didn't realize how fragile our democracy is. I mean, I am a licensed attorney. I have studied and practiced the law over the last 25 years. I've practiced literally in courtrooms over the last about 18 years. So, I mean, I'm steeped in the law. This has been my life for 2 decades. And I just thought, like so many Americans, that our democracy was stable. And we see how fragile it is. One man is about to, unless we do something, and I'm going to share with you what I think we can do, is able to buckle our democracy because it is fragile. Don't ever forget that. Our democracy is fragile because when you realize that, you will do what you need to do within the bounds of the law to protect it. Second, our Constitution was built for this very threat. That is the reason why the framers and the founders put in checks and balances, established the rule of law, made 3 co-equal independent branches of the government so that one personality could not topple our country. Remember, they were doing their best to get away from a king, a monarch, or a dictator. So they tried to build in certain protections to keep such a person at bay. You remember the Bill of Rights were added, insisted upon by the framers to check the power of the federal government, basically. All right, so our Constitution was built for this. 3, our Supreme Court will decide if we survive. And that does not give us a lot of confidence because in many ways, they helped create what we're currently experiencing with the absolute immunity case, right? With allowing President Trump to even run for re-election after the January 6th insurrection. So there's not a lot of confidence there. And many believe that they are lock in step with this administration in their goals of increasing executive power and helping Trump, I guess, stall or prevent a progressive movement from occurring in this country. We know that's the case with Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas. All right, so far, I can say this, and this is good news, that the Trump administration has not defied a Supreme Court order, okay? Because the Supreme Court, even with this due process Garcia case, with the Venezuelan folks who were sent over to El Salvador, even with those cases, there's still some wiggle room for the Trump administration because of the Supreme Court. So the Trump administration has not just outright defied SCOTUS. All right, so that could happen, but it hasn't happened yet. Also, our federal judges are shielded, but they're not invincible. All right, again, they're shielded, but they're not invincible. And here's how they're shielded. Because they have a lifetime appointment. Okay, so they serve for life so that they cannot be so easily influenced by local pressure. Also, they can't be fired, although they still can be impeached, but they shouldn't be convicted unless there's bad behavior, something that warrants impeachment. And we saw Chief Justice John Roberts knock that idea down when he put out a statement a couple of months ago saying essentially that you don't try to impeach a judge just because he ruled against you. All right? So they are shielded in several ways. The framers intended for them to be shielded. But again, they're not invincible. And we African Americans have had to rely on federal judges for these reasons, for the reasons I just gave you. Because when there was local prejudice and local racism and so on, federal judges were in a position to yet rule in a fair and just way and not be concerned about, again, local influence. But even with all of that, they're not invincible. And there's one judge who just comes to mind when I think about the vulnerability of federal judges, and that's Judge Esther Salas. She is the judge who unfortunately lost her son to a person who came to her home and shot and killed her son. And I believe he also shot her husband, but he survived. So yeah, they're shielded, but they're not invincible. So their concerns are grounded in facts. And our national strength, remember this, consists of the faith, courage, unity, and determination of we the people. Of we the people. Ultimately, we have the strength and the power. Now, let me close with this. In order for our democracy to survive, we the people must do 5 things. 1, we got to pray to God. We got to pray to God because what we're dealing with here is not just constitutional, not just legal, but it's spiritual. So we need to pray to God. Second, we need to protest Trump's agenda peacefully. We got to register. We got to let our displeasure and dislike of his agenda, the parts that we disagree with, we got to let that be known through peacefully protesting. We can't stay in the house. Now, there are different ways to protest, but we cannot stay in the house and put our heads in the sand and look the other way, because if we do, that sends a message that we're basically okay with it. So number 1, pray to God. Number 2, protest peacefully. 3, press Congress. We got to press the Congress to push back on Trump's agenda. Because if they step up and start doing their job, then they can put a stop to a lot of this. Now, of course, the GOP controls both chambers, but there is still something called the filibuster. And the GOP in the Senate does not have the 60 votes on many things to push that agenda forward. But the Congress people need to hear from us. We need to be overwhelming and bombarding their phone system with calls, letting Congress know we don't like this or that or that or this. Also, we got to protect the Constitution. We got to protect and to defend the Constitution. What does that mean practically? Well, that means that if we see the Trump administration trying to do something that's unconstitutional, we push back. We do the third thing. We call our Congress people and we let them know that we want them to insist, to protect, and to defend the Constitution. And then finally, we participate in our democracy by voting. We cannot vote the couch. We cannot. We must, in 2026, it's coming up, and it's going to come here, it's going to get here a lot faster than you realize. And I read an article recently where Trump has already approaching $1 billion that he will use some of that money for the 2026 midterms. And that's assuming that we even have midterms. So we got to vote. We got to vote in opposition to Project 2025. All right, so those 5 things are critical. What are they again? We got to pray to God. We got to protest peacefully. We got to press Congress. We got to protect the Constitution. And fifth of all, we got to participate by voting. Our democracy is fragile. Remember that. If we don't protect it, it will be taken away from us. Okay, so I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video, and remember, stay woke.